Why do you want them to listen to your podcast?
So that when they think about starting a business, they've got the content that is pointing them in the right direction.
That is such a valuable piece of advice there.
The change in mindset makes a massive difference.
Welcome to Aussie Lawn Stars.
G'day, Gary.
Welcome to the dungeon. How you doing, Gavin?
Good, mate. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Now, I've got to make a little announcement here because I'm trying to attract more people to this. I found you, or you found me, through Instagram. And the more people that say hello to Aussie Lawn Stars or Gary Ashton on Instagram, the more people I'm finding through that path to interview for the podcast. And I'm working really hard to grow my Instagram. But
it's a hard thing. I still haven't worked it out yet.
It's not just about growing my Instagram. It's about finding interesting leads and getting good interviews for the podcast. And so, yeah, I'm finding at the moment my focus has been purely trying to find more interviews through Instagram. And, yeah, we're going to take a deep dive into your business shortly because it looks really interesting.
Oh, thanks, mate.
Genuinely, it does. But above and beyond that, you're an interesting person. So let's give everybody a bit of an introduction to you. So Gavin Matthews. Yep. And you look like you're a couple of years younger than me. I'm 47. You must be like at least
34.
10. Okay, I was going to say 10 years younger, but yeah, there you go. So Gavin, you would have had a couple of different careers by now in your life, and I want to know where you started from, what attracted you to gardening and lawn care, and where you've been through on that journey.
Okay. So early on, we'll go back to family life for me was pretty rough growing up, and I had my mum who was very interested in gardening, so I spent a lot of time with her in the garden growing up, and on my weekends, weekends and Christmas holidays, I'd go and work at Rankin's nurseries, doing budding and grafting. And this was in my early teens.
Yeah, okay.
So I also started taking drugs and alcohol quite young. Got into hospitality in my mid-teens and worked in hospitality up into my mid-20s. Eventually, where I got sober. I've been 9 years off drugs and alcohol now.
Awesome.
And found myself back in the garden path, and was like, oh, I miss doing this, and I think I'll follow this in a career. So I went and studied a diploma of horticulture whilst working at Lucas House and Gardens.
Yeah. So when you said that you started on drugs and alcohol quite young, and we don't need to go into all of the sordid details, but you were still living at home, had family struggles, and that was an outlet for you?
Yeah. For me, it was my father was an alcoholic, so we've always had that around us, and it was a very social thing to do with my dad. And where we started kind of 9-10 years old, drinking with dad, and then getting onto the harder stuff around 12 or 13 years old.
That is young.
Yeah, both me and my brother, my younger brother.
Wow.
So I was right into partying, like going to raves and warehouse parties, and eventually started running a few of my own at one stage or another.
Nice.
And getting up to a lot of mischief. And then eventually was managing bars and nightclubs on Chapel Street for a time.
The only raves I've been to is by accident when I've been riding my dirt bike through the Wadigan Mountains, and they're having a rave in the bush, which is less policed than one in the city, I guess.
Yep. I definitely partaked in a few of those. Yeah. So eventually that took me to working at Lucas House and Gardens, where I was there for about six years. And head gardener there for about a year, which saw me overseeing training for new incoming staff, a little bit of quality control, a little bit of quoting, but not a huge amount. after which I eventually started working at Gardner and Son
Yeah.
for about 6 months. The idea was there to help them develop and grow the maintenance side of the business, and eventually they decided not to go that way with the business, and
Yeah. Okay.
I ended up going out on my own, which has been this last year.
Yeah. Okay. So, whereabouts have you been working? So you mentioned Lucas as well as Gardner and Son. So I'm just trying to give people a picture of whereabouts this is. Is this in Melbourne?
Melbourne's inner east.
Inner
So,
east? Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
so the leafy suburbs of Melbourne.
Yeah. Okay.
Prahran, Windsor, Canterbury, Toorak,
Right.
Kew,
Yeah. Okay.
Brighton, Elwood.
Yep. So a lot of the higher end gardens around Melbourne then.
Correct. Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to work in some spectacular award-winning gardens over the years, which I can't say how grateful I was for that experience to work for James in such a professional capacity and business.
Yeah.
It was very interesting to see how that operation was run, and working in some of those gardens was just an absolute treat. One of my favourites was in Canterbury, which was a Robert Boyle garden, which just had this magnificent form to it that was just flowed beautifully from front to back. Nice big wood features throughout the whole garden, and real pleasure to work in.
Yeah. Nice. I'm very envious. I've interviewed a few.
I've seen some of your photos and stuff online. You've got some nice gardens too.
Yeah, certainly. I've done some nice gardens, but certainly not in inner cities of Melbourne or Sydney. So yeah.
Is that kind of something you'd aspire for more, or because I heard you mention that on one of your last podcasts, you were looking to get into a bit more of the higher end of the market at one stage, or?
So I wouldn't say I'm necessarily aspiring to that. I would be aspiring more to doing the commercial end of the market rather than private gardens. So that's where my focus has been the last few years, is all commercial work.
Oh, sorry, I must have misheard.
No, that's all right. I have looked at several options for what areas I could grow my business at the moment, and one of those options is to target more residential work. But certainly the commercial gardens have a lot of, I'd call them high end, but there's a lot of gardens around that are commercial that warrant the attention, and they don't necessarily have somebody overseeing you to make sure it's done their way. They want it done your way because you are the gardener, rather than it being the homeowner that's invested in it when it's commercial site.
Is this like body corporates, or is it more like commercial land, as in businesses and stuff like that? Is that kind of...
Yeah, businesses, not body corporates. I've done very little with body corporates. I've done some jobs here and there that are body corp, but yeah, I've had very narrow experience with body corp.
Yeah, I've had a few. We managed a couple through Lucas House and Gardens.
Yeah.
Same
body
thing.
corp's painful.
They can be, yeah. And if you've got a committee and everything involved, it can get messy pretty quickly. Instead
of one homeowner that cares about the gardens, you've got 10 or 20 or 30 homeowners who only care when they want to, but enough to be painful.
Yeah, and like you get them coming out, you've got your work order when you start your day when you get there, and then you've got 3 or 4 people coming out going, can you just do this for me? Can you just do this for me? And it's like... You're going to have to talk to the committee member, and we'll go through them.
Yeah, when it's a business and you're looking after their high-end gardens, if an employee comes out and shows some interest in the gardens, it's like, oh, that's cute. Thanks.
Thanks for your input.
Yeah, now go back to your desk. I actually really enjoy it when employees show an interest in the gardens. But certainly there is recognition that that's my domain. I'm the one who's responsible there.
I haven't really had any experience in that side of the business, to be honest with you. We had like 1 or 2 lawns that we had that were just owners, clients of ours, businesses, and they just wanted us to just do it because they didn't want to deal with anyone else.
Yeah.
And so we'd just go and mow the nature strip and do a little bit of weeding in the garden and stuff like that. But it was nothing like the other gardens that we had managing at the time.
Yep. Yeah, I must say the businesses I've done where it's a nature strip, it's incredibly uninspiring.
Mm. Yeah, it's yeah, you're kind of in there for 15 minutes and then you're gone.
Well, the other thing is the nature strip is incredibly low value for the business as well. If they've got a garden, then
At least you can spend an
that
hour.
becomes a lot more valuable.
Mm. Mm.
Whereas if it's just keeping the nature strip tidy, it really is you're just an outdoor janitor.
Mm.
So
Yeah, it's an interesting. Like I said, I'm curious on how that works as a business and what you actually do to acquire those clients as well. Is it through word of mouth, or is it more? Do you actually go out and seek those clients as well?
what you were saying there, the commercial sites that I have targeted, I've been able to gain input there through word of mouth rather than advertising, but it is a combination of the two. So being able to demonstrate to a business that you have a reputable business already through your Instagram portfolio, through being able to put together a presentation to them that showcases all of your work. It's really helpful. That's where
I think that's a through line throughout the whole horticultural and landscaping business is being able to communicate what you actually do, what your services are. Because I've found through my learnings over the last year in particular, being concise with your projects and being able to deliver a presentation is actually very important, communicating it in a way that the clients understand.
And this will vary depending on the level of client that you have, right? So if you're doing a bunch of 15-minute jobs or 45-minute jobs and the neighbour sees that you're cutting their grass, then the neighbour is likely to go, oh, how much? Can you do mine too? And the qualifier is how much, and then they've already seen your quality of work. If the price is right, then do mine too. Right. So the word of mouth is very simple when it's small, easy jobs like that. But when it comes to a larger commercial contract or a high end job like you're doing, then the qualifiers are a little bit higher. So for me, it's been a case of word of mouth still gets me in the door without a doubt. And that really comes to identifying the right people to talk to, making friends in the right places, going to the right dinner and inviting the right person back to your place for dinner. And then, just building those relationships with people that will help get you in the door is really important. But then proving that you are capable of delivering through those presentations is critical. So, yeah, I started going into social media and, drone footage, things like that to start with to really try and capture what I could do. And yeah, it started off with smaller commercial sites and it's grown and grown. So I think initially I was doing commercial sites that would take a couple of hours and they'd want weekly. And then I worked my way up to doing a cemetery that was an all-day job once a week. And then, the next contract after that, I started bouncing up to sort of $50,000 a year plus. So,
yeah, it's interesting. Like when I started off 4 years ago, I kind of started off doing the business as a hobby, just on the side. Wasn't taking it too seriously, and I was operating out of a bike and a bike trailer. Funnily enough,
yeah, that works.
Yeah, well, look, I didn't have my license at the time, and like I said, I was pretty late to starting in life, and I with those drug and alcohol issues, I'm glad I didn't have my license at the time, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah, understandable.
So yeah, I was operating out of a bike trailer and doing that locally. I had some friends and family who lived in the area who were giving me some work, and didn't think much of going out on my own full time anytime soon. And eventually I was getting asked to do more and more, and eventually started team leading at Lucas House and Gardens and had the vehicle there, and so I was managing 1 day a week on my own.
Yeah.
And I was doing the real basic stuff to start, like not really high end gardens at this stage. Friends and families, and can you help me mow the lawn? I'm getting on. Just started with that and slowly scaled. And like you said, having those qualifiers when I went out full time was making sure I had a website that was presentable, getting the Instagram out there. I think it's integral these days. People need that bit of proof of social proofing for you to be actually come onto their property. It is a pretty intimate thing to invite someone into your home and let them work on your garden. It's
That's it.
And I think that's the gratifying side about it for me is being able to give people back a bit of peace of mind at the end of the day. And I really don't take that for granted, and really like that side of the business.
Yeah. So yeah, when I started, I think it was reasonable to aim for residential jobs that were $1,000 a year, and I'd like to talk about yearly quotes rather than one-off quotes or per service quotes. It keeps things in perspective. But yeah, initially it was chasing those jobs that were about $1,000 a year, and nowadays you might say between $1,000 and $5,000 a year for a residential client that you might take on. And talking to somebody else recently, they were aiming for $7,500 a year per client.
Yeah, I'm sitting now with most of mine around the $5,000 a year annually, and I contract out everything from mulching to fertilizing annually. So a full fertilization program that includes foliar feed, pest and disease management, mulching every year. And so and they'll get a budget each year with that.
Yeah, so if you're talking now, I would say $2,000 a year or less, then the client's not going to be very invested in what you're doing. As long as you turn up and it doesn't look terrible, then you're going to get paid. You walk away, you move on, you do the next one. But when you're talking $4,000 to $10,000 a year, the client is invested in making sure that what you're delivering is good quality. So that's where things like the website, the social media presence, and the ability to give them a presentation is important.
Yeah, and ideally the part of the market that I've been aiming for is that client that is invested in their garden, wants that presentation and wants that attention to detail at the end of the day. It's for me, it's that work, it's that job satisfaction. I enjoy doing that type of work. I take a lot of pride and gratification from actually producing a product at the end of it that's enjoyable and pulls people into it. And that's what a garden should be. It should invite you out into it.
Okay. So you worked for Lucas House and Garden. How many years were you with them?
It was six years, I think. 5 or 6 years.
Okay, and that was you worked for them, and then you went and worked for Gardner and Sons, and then you came back to Lucas.
No. So I went straight out on my own after that. After Gardner.
Yep.
So prior to that, I had some experience working at a retirement village for 2 years in my teens as well as a maintenance guy.
Yep. Yeah,
and that was a team.
Retirement villages are sort of like body corps, aren't they? Where the individual units will come out and tell you how to do your job. Pretty
much. Yeah, most of that job just entailed mowing and edging and blowing and spraying weeds, and that was about it. Like they were nice gardens, and we did do a little bit of hedging there as well.
Yeah. Okay.
And I was there for close to 2 years.
Yep.
That was just after I'd left school at about 14. So.
Yeah, you left school early.
Yeah, well, I got expelled. So.
Yep.
As a mature age student, I went back and did my horticulture diploma and conservation diploma, and I found learning a lot easier for me. I'm dyslexic, so school wasn't easy for me.
Okay.
And I did struggle with that side of it. And I think also just with everything that I had going on at home as well.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting because dyslexia has often been associated with autistic spectrum disorders and is considered a learning disorder. But my understanding, people with dyslexia, it's not necessarily a disorder, as it's a different order. It's the way your brain functions a little bit differently to somebody else. So your brain is really good at organizing things in different ways and making sense of that. Whereas words on a page, the patterns are not easy for you to recognise.
Yeah,
Other patterns, like
we just see things differently to other people, and we work differently to other people, and that's just part of learning about yourself. I think as you grow up, for me, it's been learning strategies that work for me and developing systems that work for me. And it's just like I struggled through high school and primary school, and it wasn't for me. But then when I got into studying horticulture and conservation, I thrived in it. It was just finding that right approach and that right way of doing things for myself individually. And in some cases, I've just got to work harder than other people, and that's just me, and I'm fine with that. I've got to hustle a little bit, and I'm fine with that.
Yep. Yeah. Now, when it comes to doing horticulture, you had conservation as well as horticulture, which means you would look at horticulture through a different perspective to some people.
Yeah, it's a whole ecosystem. I think we've got a service to play in ecosystem services as gardeners and horticulturalists and lawn people. In enhancing the natural systems and environments around us. And it doesn't have to be so esoteric, or, it can be a science as well. And there is a science that's been developed around what suits what. And, for me, what that means is I try to use a mixture of natives and perennials in my landscaping side of things. I'm not as dogmatic as most conservationists in the fact that I do like a lot of my introduced species. And sorry?
Have you listened to Muddy Boots podcast?
A couple of times, yeah.
Yeah, don't mind giving them a shout out at all. It's well worth listening to. But Keith off the Muddy Boots podcast talks about this on one episode that I listened to recently. I have to try and dig it up and see if I can find it. But he was talking about the difference between natives and introduced species, and saying that often natives are not the best plant for the environment that you might be working in. So a native, you might find there are some natives that work well in the environment you're working in, and other natives that would be really bad to put in there. So
I think especially in the urban setting as well, like there's so much white pollution and different environments, and heat island effect is a massive aspect that we need to consider now. And we base a lot of the EVCs are ecological vegetation classes that we base a lot of the environmental overlays and the plantings off. The data's from 200-300 years ago. It's these planting classes that we're using. It's a different environment out there now. A lot of these plants that we're putting in there don't survive and don't do well, and they don't thrive.
And not just that, but some plants are really not good to have around houses and cars. If you've got you got a massive gum tree.
Yep.
Dropping branches on houses, cars, people, it's a disaster. So there are better trees to put in those residential areas.
That's not to say that we shouldn't just not plant natives, though, at all. It's right plant, right place, and that's something with horticulture you'll get stamped into when you're studying. It's knowing your plants and knowing which ones to put in where. They're all different. They're all individual. And it's funny with the native gardens that kind of came in the 70s and 80s. A lot of those, like a lot of people have kind of been burnt from those because they were told as low maintenance. You didn't have to prune them. You didn't have to do anything with them. You could just let them and set them and forget them. And they look terrible. Where I'm really enjoying now using some of the natives in a more formal setting and pruning them in a way that's, like topiary. You can shape them up. Ostromertus deluce, which is a really fantastic little native shrub. You can make balls out of it. You can shape it. And you can give some real formality to these gardens as well.
I've come across a number of natives that are really good for topiary or hedge trimming. There's some really good options around there. Not that the native is always the best choice, but there are plenty of natives that are a good choice. So, yeah,
No, I think
I've
that's
been looking into that.
I think we're on the same page with that for sure. It sounds like.
Yeah. Well, I spend a bit of time up in the bush. I'm either out full driving or bushwalking or whatever else at times, motorbike riding. And people will scoff at that when you're full driving and motorbike riding, saying you're destroying the bush. But, you're out there in the bush enjoying it. And I'm out there looking at a number of...
I think we'd all be better off if more people spent time out doing those kind of things, As much as the destruction side of things isn't great, but at least they're out there engaging with the natural environment to some extent, and it makes most people think a bit more. They appreciate it more,
Yeah, there certainly is some destructive things that happen in the bush, and it makes you shudder when you see some of the destruction that happens. But yeah, I appreciate being out there, and I enjoy the bush and the natural environment. But yeah, there's been a number of times I'm out there and I'm going, okay, that plant there would be awesome in a garden at home. And we're not supposed to take them out of the bush, right?
That's when you take a photo and then you go down to your local nursery and go, can you guys get this one?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's laws against taking plants out of the bush no matter where you are.
Yep, that's the way things are now.
I don't know, how would that apply? You might not have the answer, but I know national parks, you don't touch anything, right? But if it's state forest, I'm not sure.
Seeds and flowers, you shouldn't be taking them from the bush at all, because that's the natural reproduction. Sorry?
That's what I thought.
Yeah. It's an illegal offence, technically speaking. Yep. But I think if someone's taking a few flowers from an acacia that's got a couple thousand on there, I don't think anyone's going to mind too much,
Yeah, we're not promoting it, but if you do it, yeah, it would be very different if you're on your own as an individual and you take a couple of flowers off a plant. It's compared to
someone naturally poaching plants, which does happen, and it is a real problem in some areas. There's some species of cacti I know in different parts of the world that have gone completely extinct due to poaching, and that's to supply the succulent market to parts of Europe and America and Australia. So
there's a number of plants that grow natively in my area that are very popular plants. And so I can understand why people might go into the bush to poach them. But yeah, it's full recognition of exactly what you're saying, that's where there's a problem, is because they become highly desired plants, then the numbers that get taken out of the bush are damaging, potentially threatening the local environment or the species surviving in the bush. So yeah. Doesn't stop me from going, yeah, that's a really nice one.
Well, that's why we do what we do, isn't it? We appreciate them, the plants quite a lot. It's we're very lucky to have such an awesome career to be in.
Yeah. Yeah, so I know when I was finishing school, I wasn't planning on going into lawn mowing and gardening, but yeah, now I look at it and go, you know what, I can't think of anywhere else I'd rather be. And when I'm working on a commercial site and office workers talk to me, now, and particularly if it's been a wet day, they're like, oh, how's it going out there? And I'm like, no place I'd rather be.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? That contrast. I think having that experience in a different industry, like I did with hospitality as well.
Yeah.
It does make you appreciate it, I think, more. I've had experience with people that have been in the industry from the very beginning, and they've gotten to a point in their career where they're kind of over it a little bit, and that's okay. And
yeah, well, I've had several different careers, and I really appreciate leaving an office environment to run my own business and work outdoors. But I get the best of both worlds now.
What business were you in before this, prior to?
So my previous job, I was working for an insurance company doing workers' compensation, so case management for workers' comp, and that was eye-opening.
I can imagine so.
Let's just say, as a case manager for workers' comp, you're not a well-liked person.
You're saying yes or no to people getting money or not for their injuries. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, I obviously can't talk about it publicly with any detail, but needless to say, there was threats that came over the phones at times.
Yeah, I feel for people like yourself in those kind of jobs, because it needs to be done.
Well, I feel for the people on the other end of the line. When they're making a threat, it's because they feel threatened.
Oh, they're backed into a corner.
Yeah.
Desperate people do desperate things.
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, I can't go into all the details. I'm thinking about specific cases now, and it's still,
let's move
14,
on.
almost 15 years later.
Still traumatized.
No, not really. I actually, I really valued the work that I did there. The
You'd have a better
company that I worked for.
appreciation for OH&S than most, I would say, too.
Yes, definitely. And I do talk to people occasionally about work health safety and OH&S because I've got that background. But yeah, certainly, I really appreciated the work. I did not appreciate the way that the case managers were treated. So
Just
anyway,
a lot of hours, or just from the other end of the phone, you're saying?
Oh no, from every end. Like the employer wasn't great. So and yeah, the job itself I liked, but just you want to be treated right for doing that sort of work, and yeah,
You'd think that other people on the other side would understand a bit more, like your bosses and stuff, because they've obviously been in the environment for long enough to know better.
you would think.
You'd think,
but I mean, it's funny because any sort of business, you find you've got those micro cultures that exist, and it seemed like within insurance companies, different departments had good cultures and bad cultures. So, yeah, it is what it is. I'm glad I'm out of there.
makes two of us. Like hospitality ate me up and spat me out pretty quickly. I was working way too many hours and
Yeah,
living the lifestyle with that, and it was fun to do in my 20s for a while. And look, I still love food, and like cooking's a hobby now. I appreciate that side of it.
Yeah, my wife likes it when I cook,
Mm.
and I like to cook, but I don't like having to cook.
Yeah, it's better as a hobby, isn't it?
If I choose to cook, that's great.
Yeah.
But I just do that once every now and then. I'm too busy podcasting and gardening.
Oh, you've obviously got your roles in the relationship, so that must work for the both of you, I guess.
Yeah. I try not to be too traditional in the roles, but occasionally it's a case of going, you know what, if you want to do the work outdoors and all the lawns and the gardens, go for it.
Look, it's not even about being traditional. It's just about working in a team, isn't it? That's what a good relationship is,
That's exactly right. Yeah. So, I mean, let's face it, traditional roles often work for people because they're easier to work with, but it's not always the case, and it's most definitely not been the case for a lot of examples I've seen growing up even. So.
Everyone's got a different dynamic with their partner, and one might have more traits that likes doing certain things to the other. It's just how it is.
That's right.
We all complement each other in our own ways.
Yep. My traits lean me towards motorbike riding while she does all the housework. Sorry, that was a nasty joke.
Shots fired. Does she listen to the pod?
No. Welcome to Aussie Lawn Stars. Do you want to leave your job to create a profitable and enjoyable lawn and garden business? Aussie Lawn Stars shares the stories, lessons and advice to help you grow a healthy, productive, efficient and sustainable business. Do you want more or simply have a question about what you heard? Contact Aussie Lawn Stars at iCloud.com or look me up, Gary Ashton, on Facebook and Messenger for individual help. Business coaching helps you to have the right mindset and perspective when it comes to daily decision-making, planning, or knowing what to look for to improve your business. thinktankcoaching.com.au has helped me, and they can help you move towards your business goals. Visit their website or email them thinktankcoaching@outlook.com. If you want to establish the best practices in bookkeeping, accounting and business structure, contact Adrian from Prosper Financial on 0249 773363. And you all need to head to Lawn Mowing Contractors Australia and the Australian Professional Lawn Contractors Facebook groups for supportive communities focused on our industry.
Thank you for listening to Aussie Lawn Stars. Please remember to rate and review the show on the Apple Podcasts app or the player you use. Exciting new shows are released every Monday. Make sure you follow or subscribe to hear the next episode.